Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's tutorial we're going to go over a highly requested video from you guys. So in today's tutorial we're going to go ahead and actually build we're just going to build a simple API backend using FastAPI and MongoDB as a database. So in the last previous time I have made a whole playlist on FastAPI and React. So it's just a full stack application using FastAPI backend and React as the front end. So in that series I use Tortoise ORM as the backend. So some of you guys requested that I did a complete farm stack tutorial, meaning that FastAPI, MongoDB and React. So that's the farm stack, right? FastAPI, React and MongoDB. So you can think of this video as an entry point into that direction. So we're going to go ahead and actually build a simple to do API using FastAPI and MongoDB, and then if you guys want, you can drop a comment in the section below. We can wrap a front end around this using React and then get a full stack application which is just going to complete the farm stack framework, right, like the technology stack for the farm stack. So yeah, so even if I don't do that, right, I'm going to teach you how to use MongoDB, and you can watch my previous FastAPI and React series, and then you can connect the two knowledges together, and then you'll be able to implement a farm stack application using FastAPI, MongoDB and React as the front end. So let's get started. So the project is going to be a very simple project. So this video is going to be one video. It's not going to be any series or anything like that. It's just going to be a simple video integrating FastAPI and MongoDB. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do, let me just tell you some of the prerequisites, is that you need to have a basic understanding of FastAPI, because I'm not going to explain the basic concepts in depth. But even if you don't know FastAPI, like the basics, feel free to follow along. I'll try to explain to go a bit in depth about the basic. You also must have Python installed, obviously, and we also need to have an account open on the cloud.mongodb.com. so you can just go to cloud.mongodb.com and then you can just open up an account there, and then you'll be able to log into this place. I'll put the link in the description and other details on how to access this web platform. So once you have this, you have created an account here, we'll go ahead and actually create a cluster. So I've already created a project, and inside of the project I'm going to go ahead and actually create a database. So I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to go and choose the free one because I don't want to pay for this. So if you already have more than one database created, then it will be required to pay for it. Since I already had a database that I was using for an Express project, but I deleted it, and then so that we don't have to pay to create a new one, so that you guys can have the whole experience of creating a database yourself and then getting familiar with the cloud.mongodb.com platform. Okay, so I'm just going to go and actually create that, and this is going to go ahead and bring me a page, and in this page I'm going to put in some values here, so like where I want the server to be and other stuff like that. So you can see it's completely free, but if you already have a database running on this platform, then you have to pay for an additional one. Okay, so I'm just going to go with Amazon Azure, and I'm going to go with India since it's closest to my location, and I'm going to go and actually go ahead and actually create that. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually click on the create cluster, and it's going to go ahead and actually create that cluster for me. So this might take some time to create the cluster, so I'll be back. You can see I'm back. So you can see now my cluster has been created. It took a bit of time, so that's why I had to cut the video and resume whenever it was done. So this is our cluster. Is now being created, and it's an absolutely free. So whenever you want to create a new cluster, then you have to pay for a new one. Okay, but in this project we'll be using only this cluster. So I'm simply going to go ahead and click on the connect button, and then it's going to pop up this page. So in this page, right, I'm going to go ahead and actually say I have three options: connect with the MongoDB shell, which we are not interested in the MongoDB shell, and then the second is connect your application, which you're interested in, and also you're not interested in connecting it to MongoDB Compass, which is just like the MySQL workbench for MongoDB. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually click on the connect your application, because that's what you want to do, and this is going to bring you to this page. By default, it might be another language, so make sure that you select Python, and then you also select the Python version. I want 3.6 or later, so I'm just going to put that option there, and then you can see that replace this with the password, and then replace this with the name of the database that the connection will use to by default. Okay, so I'm just going to keep this make sure you keep this in mind. Okay, so you just copy this. Now, which password do you use? So you use the password of the user who manages this system. So for example, if I go back to here, database access, then I can see the person who has access to the database, and I can also change the password of that user. So you can see this is the person who has access to the database, and my name is Prince here, and I can also edit this detail. I don't want to show you my details. I don't know if it shows the password, so I just want to be safe. So in your case, you can click on this and then edit it, and also change the password in case you don't know what the password is. Okay, so great. So make sure that you copy this right there. So make sure that you have this, and we'll be back to this right just in a second. But before we continue with MongoDB, now that we have our database set up, let's go ahead and actually install the libraries and everything that we need. Okay, so I've already prepared this document on my GitHub page, so I'm going to drop this link. It's already completed project. I'm going to drop it in the description so you guys can find this. So I already wrote some markdown here, bit detailed, and explains everything. So we need to install a couple of libraries and dependencies that our project needs. So we need to install FastAPI, we need to install UVCon for our server, and then we also need to install PyMongo, which is just the library to work with MongoDB, Mongo databases in Python. So PyMongo is just a library to work with MongoDB databases in Python. Also for the PyMongo, we also need to install PyMongo SVR. The reason why we're installing SVR, I'll just bring you back here, and I'll go to databases, and then I'll simply try to connect, click on the connect button again, and then I'll click on application. You can see in here you're having this SRV, and the SRV, that's why we need to install this. If you don't install this thing, if you don't put this in, you get an error whenever you're trying to connect to your MongoDB database. Okay, so make sure that you have that installed. So I'm simply going to copy this, and then I'm going to go into my terminal. So I'm going to bring up my terminal this way, and then I'm going to make a directory on my desktop, and I'm simply going to call it Fast API. Make sure I get that right. API Mongo, okay, DB, something like that. Okay, and you can see we have that folder right there, and I'm going to simply change into that folder, and then right there. So I'm going to create a virtual environment. Right now I actually have a virtual environment running, so let me just deactivate that one, and then let's create a virtual environment from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say Python, and then -m venv. Okay, so I'm creating a virtual environment called venv. Again, you can change this, can be anything you want, but the rest part of it must be as it is. If you're on Linux, you can also use Python 3 if you want, but it's also fine. So if you're on Mac and Linux, make sure you keep your Python 3 in case you don't have you didn't set up your bash rc file. Okay, so I'm just going to press enter, and this is going to go ahead and actually create for me that virtual environment called venv. So when I do an ls, I can see I have a folder now called venv, and this for the virtual environment. So let's go and ahead and activate it. So to activate it is very simple. You just have to type in the following command. So you have to say source venv, which is the name of this folder, and then in there we have a folder called bin, and in there we have a folder called activate. So just type that in, and you can see our virtual environment is now activated. And you can notice that because our name of our virtual environment is in is within parentheses in the front of the line within our terminal. So great. So now that we have that that virtual environment set up, let's go ahead and actually paste the code that we've just copied from our GitHub, and then we'll go ahead and actually install this. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually say pip3 install FastAPI. You want to install UVCon, you want to install PyMongo, and also want to install PyMongo, and then the square brackets, and then in here we want to type in SRV. Okay, so make sure we got that right. So you can also, the reason why we got an error here is because I forgot to remove this one. That's why we got the command not found. Okay, because the $sign is not a command in Linux, so you have to say pip or pip3 install FastAPI UVCon PyMongo is within square bracket SRV. Okay, make sure you run that, and this is go ahead and actually install all our dependencies for us. So great. So now that's installing, let me just bring you back to our GitHub page. So now that is installed, we also need to create a project folder, a project directory like this. So we need to have a folder called config, where we're going to keep all our configurations, including our database connection configurations. We're going to have a model, so we're going to actually define our models, like the pydantic models that we'll be using in this tutorial. And then we have routes, so we're going to have our different routes. And then we have schema, where we're going to keep our schemas. Our schemas basically as just like serializers if you come from Django background. Okay, so it just has to represent the data in a certain format that we want. Okay, great. So let me just go back to our terminal and make sure that we have all that installed and everything went fine. So great. So I'm just going to clear the terminal and I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code, or feel free to use any editor of your choice. I'm just going to go with Visual Studio Code. Again, feel free to use any editor of your choice, okay, of your liking. Okay, great. So now that you're here, let's go ahead and actually create the project structure. So we need a folder called config, and then we also need another folder called let me just go back. So we need a folder called config. Here we need a folder called config, we need called models, routes, and then schemas. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually create all those tables. So we need another folder called it's gonna be routes, and then it's got created index. Let me just delete it. Sorry about that. So let me just delete it, and then I'll create a new one in the root directory. So in the root directory, let me make sure that I'm in the root directory, and then I'm going to create one called routes, and then I'm going to make sure I'm again in the root directory, create another one called schemas. So schemas, okay, you can type schemas, okay, schemas. Then let me create another one in the root directory called models, I believe. So it's going to be called models. Okay, we are going to keep all models. So great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and just take you back to my GitHub. We also need to have one Python file in our root directory called main, okay, or main or index.py. So feel free to call it either main or index, whatever you want. Okay, so I'm going to simply call it my main.py. okay, but let's stick with convention and call it main or index. Okay, now that we have that, we are good to go. So I'm just going to start a basic FastAPI. So I'm going to go from FastAPI. I'm going to import FastAPI. So now let's create an instance of it. So I'm going to instance of the FastAPI. So I'm going to now type in FastAPI and then make sure I instantiate. So I'm going to go ahead and actually save this and then bring back my terminal. So in my terminal now, I can just go ahead and actually run the code to open our development server. So now this is all we need to implement a simple FastAPI API basically. Okay, there are a lot of APIs there, but yeah, this is all the code you need, just 2 lines of code. Okay, let me just go to the UI in the browser in the terminal and then start my project. Okay, so I'm going to go UVCon, and where we install UVCon, there's no we install it so we can run our application. So in the UVCon now, the place where we wrote this code is in our main.py file. So we want to locate it. So I'm going to say main and then colon and then app. So the reason why we are saying app is the name of this instance of the FastAPI library. Okay, this instance, that's why we're saying app. So if you name this differently, then that's the name that you'll be using here. Okay, in our case we call it app, so I'm just going to call mine main colon app. Okay, run that. So this is going to start our development server on localhost at port 8000. Okay, so I'm just going to open that up, and you can see we are localhost at port 8000, and then you can go to documentation and you can simply type in here docs, and then this return to you the documentation, the open API documentation. Now you can see this is just a basic API. We don't have any routes or whatsoever. So now let's go ahead and actually begin to add different functionality to our API. So I've just stopped the development server, and then I'll go back to my application right here. So now that we have that, let's go and actually create a connection to our database. So in our configs folder, I'm going to create a folder here, Python file called database.py. Okay, so run that, and then inside of our database.py, so we're going to install we're going to import from PyMongo. We're going to import the Mongo client. Great. And then now we need to go back to our browser and then get that FastAPI, get this, copy this right here. So remember how to get this, you just have to go to connect and then click on connect my application. Make sure that you have the languages and the versions of Python setup. Copy that and then go back to your Visual Studio Code and make sure you paste that right there. So now this is going to create a connection to our database. So let me just make sure I remove that, since you already imported that class right here. Okay, so now we see this part here. We have to remember, we have to replace it, right? So if I bring you back to the browser, it tells you that you have to replace this and also this. So you can leave this by default, but the password you have to change it, or else you won't be able to connect to your database. Okay, so I'm just going to explain to you this, and I'm going to change this later on, since I don't want you guys having access to my password. That's why I'm going to keep it a secret. Okay, and the best thing to do is actually to keep this in a in a virtual environment, but in this case I'll just keep things simple. So let's say that your password was secret, so you just simply type in your secret. Okay, and I told you how to get the password initially. Okay, great. So now that you have that, I'm going to simply leave this as a default. Okay, or you can change this if you want, whatever you want it to be. Okay, so now we're going to create a database. What I want to do is I want to call my database to do underscore app. Okay, that's what our database is. Let me call it to do application. So in there now we have our database. MongoDB is made up of a database, and a database has a set of files called collection. So we now need to create a collection, and I'm going to call this collection, I can think of the collection as a folder. In each of these folder you have something called files, like something like that. So I'm not going to go into depth about what MongoDB is. This is not a crash course on MongoDB whatsoever, so I'm assuming that you have the basic knowledge of what MongoDB is, and it's a NoSQL database. Okay, meaning that the data can be stored in different structures in form of forms called collections. Okay, so now let's go and actually create the collection that we want. So I'm just going to go say collection. I'm just going to call it collection underscore name. You can call it whatever you want, and I'm going to say db, which is this variable API. I'm going to create a database. I'm going to create a collection. I'm going to call it to do's underscore app. Okay, that's how we create our collection. This is going to create a connection. It's going to create a database called the database called to do application, and inside of the database you're going to have to do's collection, to do's underscore app collection. So great. So now that we have that there, that's all we need. So make sure that you input in your password. Okay, so I'm going to now input my password, and then I'll be back to you guys. So I am back to the recording. I've just simply typed in my password, and my password is in here. Now I can really show in the content of this since it already has my password. Okay, so let's get started and go ahead and actually create our continue with this. So let's go ahead and actually create inside of each of these folders that we have. You're simply going to create a file, a Python file. In there, I'm going to call it to do's underscore model.py. Okay, and then for the routes, you're going to create another Python file they called to do's underscore routes.py, and then in a schemas again you're going to do something very similar. We're going to call it to do's underscore schema.py. Okay, now that we have that there, great. So now we'll go back. What we simply need to do now, we need to go into to do's underscore model.py. That's where we're going to create our model, and our model is just going to be a pydantic model. Okay, so from pydantic, so I'm going to say pydantic. I'm going to import the base model. Okay, so from pydantic I'm going to import the base model. So I'm going to have a class here, and this class is going to be called to do, and then this class is going to have a base model. It's going to inherit from the base model. So great. So now I'm going to have the name here. Each to do is going to have a name, and the name is going to be of type string. So if you are not familiar with type hints in Python and all of this new syntax in Python, I have a whole tutorial about type hints in Python. I'm going to leave a link in the description. I'm going to put a card up here. You guys can watch that video on type hints about Python. So it's actually a single video about 30 minutes long. I went a bit into depth about type hints. So if you don't really understand type hints, it's a good idea to take a look at type hints, since FastAPI implements type hints in a huge detail. Okay, so having a good understanding of type hints in FastAPI is just going to set you forward and make your code give you ability to read code much more easily. Okay, so description. Each to do is going to have a description, and it's going to be of type string, and then you're going to have completed, and then completed is going to be of type bool, a boolean, and then you're going to have date. In a date can be something str. Okay, something like that. Great. So now that's all our database is going to look like. Our pydantic model is going to have, each to do is going to have a name. It's going to have a description of what you want to do, and whether it's completed or not, and then you also have a date. Okay, and the date is just a string. Okay, you can even remove the date part if you want, but yeah, I'm just go ahead and actually remove the date part, and then let's have a name, description, and then the completed or not. Great. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and define our schemas and see how our this is going to mark to our schema. So I'm going to go into my schemas folder, and then go to do's underscore schema.py, and in here I'm going to simply write a function. Sorry for that. I'm going to write a function here, dev, and this function is simply going to be to do underscore serializer. So I'm going to have a to-do serializer. This to-do serializer is going to take in a single to-do, and it's going to return to us a dictionary. So I'm going to pass in a dictionary, and what this to-do is going to do is going to return to us, what is going to return to us is a dictionary, right? Because in here I've specified the type hint to be of type a dictionary. So in here I'm going to have an ID, so I'm going to have an ID, and the ID is going to be str. We're going to convert the to-do. We're going to get the underscore ID part of our to-do. The reason why we are saying underscore ID is that MongoDB by default uses underscore ID for the ID field rather than just ID. Okay, so that's something to keep in your mind. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm also going to say to-do, and I'm going to get the name part of our to-do, and then I'm going to go to description. This is going to be our description. So this description is going to also be to do, and then you're going to get the description field. Okay, description. So that's that, and then we also need completed. So we have to have here pass in completed. Let me just go back to my DB model for once, model, and this is actually completed. Okay, I'm just making sure that I have the spelling right. So to do, and then I'm going to call this completed. I'm going to access the completed field. So great. So now that we have that done, now I'm going to write another schema, and this schema is going to serialize a lot of to-dos, like more than one or more to-dos. Okay, so this is going to only handle a single to-do, while this is going to handle a to-dos or a to-do. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So you're going to pass in serializer here, and you're going to pass in our to-do, and in here we're simply going to return again. You're going to be returning a list. Okay, so we're going to be returning a list rather than a dictionary. Okay, so what you're simply going to do here, write in a list comprehension, and you're going to say to do serializer. Okay, and for each of that you're going to pass in a to do. And how is it going to do that? You're going to say for to do in to do's. Okay, so this must be to do's, my bad. So this is to do. So for each to do into to do's, you're going to call the single to do serializer to serialize it. So if a single to do is passing here, then this will be called, and then we'll return a list at the end. If there are many to do's, they also for each to do a to do serializer will be called. Okay, so that's all for that. Now that we have that, we're basically done with our schema. These you can think of a schema just like a serializer, or how we control, how we represent our data in FastAPI. So it's just if you're coming from Django REST framework, then this is the same concept as a serializer over there. Okay, so now that we have all that set up, we are basically done. So what we're simply going to do now is to build our routes. So now we need to build our routes, and we need to go to our routes, and then go to to-dos underscore routes.py, and in here that's where we're going to implement our routes. So what we need to do first, we need to import something. So we need to we need to import it here. Let me sure I'm typing in the right place. So I'm going to say from FastAPI, I'm going to be importing API router. So great, and I'm also going to be importing something that to our model and our schemas right here. So I'm going to say from let's first import our database. So from config.database, we're going to be importing our collection name, because we're going to be using the collection to interact with our MongoDB. Okay, so from models, you're going to be models.to-do model. You're going to be importing we're going to be importing a couple of something from here. You're going to only import the to-do, and the to-do is simply our database right here, this class right here. So great. And also for now we also need to import from the schema. So from schemas, to do schema, we want to import something. What we want to import in this case, we want to import to do schema. This is actually to do underscore schema, and we also want to import to do's underscore schema. Okay, so this is to do, this is to do's schema. Okay, so there's a plural and singular right there. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and actually create a basic API route object. Okay, so we are going to say to do underscore API underscore router, and this is going to be an instance of API router. just like that. So now that we have that, let's go and actually write the CRUD functionality. So the first one I'm going to write is the retrieve functionality. Okay, we're going to write the retrieve, and then the retrieve is the easiest, right? So what you're simply going to do, use the decorator, and then we're going to pass in to do underscore API API router. So if you know what a decorator is in Python, I have a whole series on what a decorator is in Python, so you can check out the video above there. So basically what a decorator is, that I can explain to you in a simple terms. A decorator is a callable. Callable is basically a function. So decorator is a callable that takes in a callable as an input and returns a callable as an output. So if you have taken a function and before you execute that function, maybe you want to do something else, then you can use a decorator. That's basically what a decorator is on a surface level. So if you want more in there, I have a whole series on decorators, so you can check that out. Okay, so you're going to pass in your async, and I'm going to have a div here. I'm going to call it get underscore to do. Okay, this is going to be get to do's rather. So in here, what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to go to do's. It will be equals to, this will be to do's serializer. So make sure I have to do's serializer, and then make sure this is plural, not singular. Okay, so collection name dot we want to just say find, just like that. So this is going to return to us all the to-dos from our database, and what you're going to do is going to return it to that the user who made that request. Okay, so you can actually pass it in here. You can say pass an additional, you can say status, and you're going to say a status is of okay, and then you can pass in here data, and the data is going to be our to-dos right there. So great, so make sure I change this to be get the right spelling. So to-dos, so this is going to get all the data from our database, and I'm simply going to return a dictionary having the value key, which is going to be okay, and then the data, which is going to be all our to-dos. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually save that. So now that I have that saved, let me go ahead and actually show you something. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to my terminal. So just go back to my terminal, and then here I'm going to run again my app. So just uvicon space main and then colon app. Okay, so now that I have that running, I'm going to go back to my browser and then go to our Swagger UI here, and then I'm going to refresh this, and then it doesn't actually show up. Okay, now I know why it doesn't show up. My bad, I forgot one thing we need to do. Okay, remember we created the main.ip, so we didn't actually import our routes here. So let's make sure that we have that routes imported right there. So what we simply need to do is go ahead and actually import that route, and then that problem should be fixed. So we need to import the routes that we created from our to-dos here. We need to import this to-do underscore API underscore router. We need to import that router into main, since the entry point into our application is in main, right? So great, so now we need to import it from there. So we need to say from to-do actually from router. So from routers dot to do router routes, going to import to do API. So we're going to import to do underscore API underscore router there. Great. So now that we have that there, I'm simply going to go and I'm saying app dot, which is just our instance of the FastAPI, and then you're going to include router, and then you're going to pass in our to do API router right there. So great. So now that we have that, I'm going to go back to my terminal and make sure that I stop my development services. I'm not using the reload flag. Okay, so I'm going to start that again. So we have an error here. So it says that pip install PyMongo. It says it can't actually find this, but you already installed it. So let me go and actually install this again. So the what it said was, let me just scroll up here. It said you install this, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually copy this and make sure that I install it. I don't know why we're getting this error, because you already installed it prior, but let me just paste that right there again. And if you also get the same error, then try to do this. Okay, yeah guys, so you can see now that's probably installed. So I'm going to go ahead and actually start my application again. So now that's running. Great. I'm going to go to my browser, and then I'm simply going to hit refresh. Now you can see we have a route here called get, and if I go on try and then execute this is going to take some time, and then it's going to return to us a response, and status is the status code is 200 and the status is okay, and then you can see we actually have no to-dos for now. So great, now that works great. So let me just go back here, and then I'll stop my development server, clear this terminal, then let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. So now that we are here, let's write other functionalities to get we can this is going to get all the to-dos. Now let's write the code to get a single to-do. Okay, so So now let's write the code to get a single to do, because this is going to return to us all the to do's. Okay, so for now we don't have any to do, so I won't be able to demonstrate this to you, but just bear with me. So this is also going to be a get request, and just make sure I have that there. So in here, what we need to do, we need to first get an ID, right? We know which to do to get. Now this is how we get create a dynamic URL in FastAPI. Again, if you're very familiar to FastAPI, I have two whole series on FastAPI, building an e-commerce API using FastAPI library, and also building a full stack React and FastAPI application. So you can go and check that out. So this is how basically we create a dynamic URL. So the user has to pass in the ID of the to do that he wants, and then we'll use that ID to filter our database. Okay. So great. So now we're going to have an async function here. So async is going to be def, this is going to be get underscore to do. Okay, the previous one was get to do's, and this one is going to be get to do. You need to pass in you need to pass in a parameter, an argument here, a parameter rather, called an ID, and it's going to be of type str. And you also need to yeah, that's all we need. Okay, so now that we have the ID, what we're simply going to do is you're going to return to do's, right? And then you're going to say collection dot this is going to be dot find, and I'm going to pass in here a dictionary of ID, and the ID is going to be of type now we need to import another library here. So the reason why we are doing this collections dot name collection name dot find. Now we are going to pass in the ID. I'm going to pass in the ID just in a second, so that the cursor object will be passed into this serializer function, which is going to move to this schema, and then make sure it's going to come over here, and then it's going to loop through, get then call this serializer, and then it's going to serialize the data into this format that you're going to return to the front end. Okay, so that's basically how it's done. So for us to be able to specify the ID, you need to import something from Python. So you need to say from this is going to be bsum. We're going to be importing object ID right there. So what you need to do here, we need to say object ID, and then you're going to pass in the ID that has been passed in. So that's all we need to get that from our database. Okay, so you just need to say ID, and then the ID is going to be the one that you have specified. Okay, so this is going to be underscore ID. So we're going to loop through going to filter our collection and find the document with the provided ID that has been passed in, and then we're going to now serialize it and then simply return it to the user. And to return it, we can also make sure that we can use this, so this to be consistent. So we're going to call it to do, and then I'm going to assign it to this value. Yeah, and I'm going to assign that to do to this value. So I'm simply going to return, and I'm simply going to copy this right here and then paste it here, and then change this to be to do. That's all we need to do. So great. So yeah, that's all we need to do. So we'll get the data, filter it based on ID, and then serialize it, and then simply return it to the front end. Great. So now that we have that, and let's go ahead and actually write one method to post to our database. So let's write it. So we're going to say the same thing again, to do API underscore API router. This is going to be a post request. Okay, and for a post request, we need to get the data from the front end, right? So what I'm going to do now, create an async function here, and this is going to be post underscore to do. Okay, and then we're going to now get the data from the front end. And the way to get that from the front end, simply saying to do, and it's going to be of type to do. Okay, again, if you're not familiar with type hints, I recommend you that you watch that series on type hints that I have on my YouTube channel. Okay, so now that we have that there, let's go ahead and actually now get the information. So we're going to simply go put this into our database. So to do this, you're going to say collection name collection underscore name dot, this is going to be insert underscore one. So you can see I'm even getting an autocomplete there. So you can see we're going to insert one, and you're also going to convert that to do into a dictionary. Okay, make sure that you convert into a dictionary, or else you have an error. So we're going to say collection name dot insert one, and what you're going to insert is a dictionary of what the to do that you have got from the front end. So this is going to return to us an ID. Now we need this ID in order to get the data that has been just inserted and return it back to the front end, right? So I'm going to now pass in your underscore ID, and this is going to be what the ID that is going to be returned. So this is going to grab the to do, then insert into our database, and MongoDB is going to return to us the ID that was used for this insert operation, and then based on that ID, you're going to now get that to do from our database. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and then paste it here. Since it's basically the same thing, so paste it there, and then this is going to be underscore ID. So that's basically what we need to do. So this is going to be rather, sorry, my bad. So this is going to be underscore ID dot insert ID. Okay, that's what we need to do. So the ID is going to be underscore ID dot insert ID. Okay, not the way I said it previously. Now that we have that, so we're going to return that to do to the front end. So great, I'm going to now paste that there. So this is going to insert the data into our database. It's going to return to us the ID that was used for that insert operation. We're going to be using that ID, okay, using that ID to filter our database, and then simply return the post that was just the to do that was just simply posted. So now that's great. Now go ahead and actually save this. Now let's go back and try our application to make sure everything is working until where we have reached. So sorry, I'm going to stop that and then clear the terminal, and then start my app again. So now everything is running. So I'm going to go back to my front end here and then try to refresh this. So you can now see we have one for post and then one for get, which takes in an ID. Okay, so let's try the one for post, and then you can see this is what we need to do. So I'm going to click on the try here, and then I'm going to simply say learn MongoDB, and then let's say the description is learn PyMongoDB. Okay, just like that, and you can say that this is false for now since you guys are still watching the tutorial. So we're going to set that to be false, and then we can simply go ahead and actually execute that. So this is going to send this back to our MongoDB database, and you can see right here it has been inserted, and we have all these fields returned back to us with all the data that you just provided. So if you go back in here to your Atlas dashboard, and you try to go to database, so let me just click on this part here, and let me just go, monitor. Let me just go back, go to collections, and in collections I'm going to go to, let's just wait for this to load. So it's taking a bit of time, but you can trust me that has been inserted. So I'll come back here whenever this is loading. So right now it's very sluggish, so let's see why it's so sluggish. Okay, we got a 404 error, so let me just go back here. Yeah, but guys, that's basically it. So you can see here the data has been inserted and the ID has been returned to us. So let me just copy this ID, and then let me minimize this, and then go to the part where we can. So let me go back to the part where I can just filter it to do based on the ID. So I'm just going to try this out, then I'm going to pass in the ID that I just got, and then let me just execute this. So you can see now we have back that to do return to us by providing that ID. So that's how it works. So now that we have that done, let's try the functionality to update our to do. So I'm going to go back to my terminal and make sure that I kill this process for now, kill the server, and then go back to Visual Studio Code. Now let's write the other functionality to update to do. Okay, so in here what you're simply going to do in here is we're going to go ahead and actually write the functionality, and it's very similar to the ones that you have done so far. So we're going to be to do underscore API router, and then this is going to be a put request. Okay, because we're going to update something, and we're simply going to update something with a given ID. So we're going to write a dynamic URL again, going to pass in that ID, then you're going to have an async function, and it's going to be def is going to be called update underscore to do, and this update to do is going to take in a to do from the front end. So we're going to pass in two things, right? An ID is going to be of type string, right, like we did for this part here, and also now we're going to expect it to do, right? So it's going to be of type to do, and in here what we're going to do is we're going to now get collection underscore name, right? So collection underscore name dot find and update. Okay, so find and update, find one and update. Okay, because we want to update only one thing. Okay, so we're going to pass in here going to pass in underscore ID, and this underscore ID is going to be, now this is where we need to use the object library that we just imported. So so object ID, we're going to pass in our ID that has been passed to the front end, and then also need to go outside of this dictionary and then pass in another dictionary. Okay, and in this dictionary what you're going to do, you're going to pass in a variable here called set. Okay, and then we're going to pass in this, I'm going to say convert this into a dictionary, then we're going to pass into do. that's all we need to do to update the given to do. So this is going to filter it based on the provided ID, and then it's going to use the data that has been provided from the front end to actually update that value. Okay, so it's going to convert the data from the front end into a dictionary and then update that value right there. So now that's done, we're going to get now return our to do to the front end. So now we're going to go ahead and actually get to do, and the to do that you have just updated. Now you might be tempted that you're just going to put a to do here and then do something like this. Now if you do this, what's going to return to is going to return to the to do before updating it. Okay, now you want it to do after update, after it has been updated. Okay, that's why you need to do this afterwards. So I'm going to do collection underscore name dot find. So I'm going to find, and I'm going to pass in underscore ID, and our ID is going to be the object again. So we're going to use the object function, object ID function, and then simply pass in our ID, and that's all we need to do. So this is going to now update it based on the using a filter it based on this ID, and then update it, and then you're going to filter it to get the updated version, and so we're simply going to return the front end. So I'm going to copy this return statement here and then simply paste it here. So that's all for the update functionality. Now let's go and actually write the one for the delete, and then we'll be done for this video. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. So this is going to be the same thing as we have done so far. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead. I can even copy this and modify it if I want. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it here. Sorry, just bring back that. So I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be change this to delete. So delete to do, and then this is everything is going to be as it is. And then to delete something, we don't actually need data from the front end, so I'm going to delete that part, and then also delete this part right here. Okay, so delete all of this. So great. So this is just going to find, and this instead of find and update is going to be find and find underscore and delete. Okay, so find and delete with this specific ID. So that's all we need to do, and after we delete it, you're simply going to return to the user nothing, right? Just an empty list here. So it's going to tell the user status okay, in getting that, indicating that everything has been deleted, and the data is simply going to be an empty string. So that's all for the CRUD functionality. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually try the update and the delete functionality. Okay, so I'm just going to go into my front my terminal, and then make sure that I have my UV started, and now it has started. So I'm going to go ahead and actually refresh this page and then minimize this. So you can see we have the to do here. So I think I made an error, so let me just go back to my terminal, stop this for now, and then go back to my VS Code. So this is going to be a delete route, not a put route. So it's going to be delete. Okay, that's one of the issues of copy pasting code, so make sure that you change that to delete. So I'm going to clear this and then start my application again, and then go back in here and then try to refresh. Hopefully we have that delete route here, and we have it here. So I'm going to go ahead and get try this out, and then execute this. Is going to return to us a single to do. So you can see we have it right here. So I'm going to copy this ID, and I'm going to use it in my other places. Okay, so in our other route. So I'm going to copy this and then minimize this. So I'm going to go into my update. So I'm going to go into update, and I'm going to click on try, pass in the ID there, and then in here I'm going to go ahead and actually grab this from here. So I'm going to grab this, copy that, and then bring it here, and then simply paste it here, so you don't have to type over that all over again. Okay, make sure I have that there, and then I'm simply going to make sure I fix that formatting like that, and also this part and this part. Okay, so now one thing I noticed is we don't need this ID whenever we are trying to update it, so we're going to delete that ID. So I'm going to learn MongoDB, and I'm going to change this to be completed to be true. So we have changed the completed to be true. We can go ahead and actually execute this. So we press on the execute button, and this is going to, we got an error. So we got a 500 error. This is an internal service error. So let's check what the error is. You say object is not iterable. So it's saying that so let me see where this error is coming from. It says that it's not iterable. So let's see where the error is coming from. So let's try to trace it. Okay, so it doesn't really have a good error output. So let me just go back to the code, and then let me just check where I probably went wrong. Okay, So we have it right here. So okay, the reason why I got this error is because I need to now serialize this to do before sending it to the front end. So I'm going to say to do's underscore serializer, and then I'm going to now wrap this in here. Okay, so my bad, I forgot to serialize that before passing it to the front end. Okay, so now that's done. Yeah, that's basically it. So just got the data from the database, we make sure we serialize it and then pass it to this dictionary. Okay, great. So I hope that error is fixed. So let me just go back to my terminal and then stop the server, clear the terminal, and then start my development server again, and then go back to the here. So I'm just going to go and actually execute this one more time. Now we can see that we got back, it has been now changed, everything has been updated. Okay, so now let's even try to update this. Learn PyMongoDB today with code with Prince. Okay, just so then let me just now go ahead and actually execute that. So this is gonna now we can see now our data has been updated. So even if I move up here and then try to execute this, we can see now it has also been updated right here. So great. So now that we have that, let me just go ahead and actually copy this ID again, and in the delete section I can simply go and actually click on try, and here I can paste that specific ID that I got, and I'm going to execute this. This is going to go ahead and actually delete it, and you can see it returns to us a status of okay, and the data field being empty. Okay, so even if I go up here and then try to get a to-dos, and then you can see now we have no to-dos in our database. So let's go and actually insert one more to-dos there. So go post, and then I'm going to go ahead and try this out, and then let's say learn Mongo, let's say MongoDB. Let's just keep the same thing we had. So let me just say here learn Mongo DB with code with Prince. Okay, so now let me just have that done, and I'm going to simply change this to be false. It's not completed, and I'm going to go ahead and actually submit that, and you can see we have back 200. Okay, and everything has been is as we expect. Okay, so even if I come in here and then try to execute this, now we should have one to do right there. Okay, and let me just come back here and I go into clusters, and then I can see it's going to show me the clusters, the collections that I have, rather, not clusters. So this is a bit slow. I don't know why their website is a bit slow today. So you can see now we have our database right there, and our database is called to do application, and that's the name of the database that we gave it. And we have the cluster here called to do's app, and you can see here we have the only one to do in there. So even if I add a new to do in here, so I'm just going to go in here and then go to post, and then post here. We can go ahead actually say this second, just add that there, and then make sure I execute this, and this can see we got that back. So even if I come in here and then try to refresh this, and then I'm going to get now the newly updated value. So I've just refreshed that page, and this is going to return to me the new to do that you have just added. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it for that, how to create a simple to-do list, to-do application using FastAPI and the MongoDB library. So you can see the second to do is this one right here, and that's how we can be able to implement a to-do list application using FastAPI and MongoDB. So guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial so far, give this video a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about FastAPI, I have a whole tool series on FastAPI with React, and the FastAPI to build an e-commerce backend. Okay, so if you guys are interested in that tutorial, we have authentication, sending emails, uploading files, profile pictures, and all this fancy stuff. You can just check out that tutorial. I'm going to leave a link up here so that you guys can find that tutorial. So guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Keep safe. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel if you haven't. It really encourages me to keep making this video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.